There's a moment in everyone's life when the world decides to test you. Not with a gentle nudge, but with a blow so personal, so deliberate that it feels almost orchestrated. Maybe it was when they laughed at your dream. Maybe it was when you were passed over, rejected, humiliated, or told, explicitly or not, that you weren't enough. That moment sticks. It doesn't fade with time. It doesn't dissolve in distraction. It roots itself in your gut. It becomes part of your story. And for many, it becomes the reason they either break or rise. Pain is a funny teacher. It doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door in. And unlike comfort, which whispers that you're fine where you are, pain shouts that something has to change. It holds up a mirror and says, this is not who you're meant to be. But here's what's most important. Pain gives you a reason, a why. And when you have a why, you can endure almost any how. We've been taught that revenge is about getting even, that if someone wrongs you, you hit back. But hitting back rarely makes us stronger. It keeps us tethered to the same level as those who hurt us. That's not growth, that's reaction. And success, true success, it doesn't come from reacting, it comes from choosing. You see, in that moment, when you're underestimated, when someone looks past you or walks away, you're being handed something incredibly valuable. Clarity. It may not feel like it at the time. It might feel like shame or heartbreak. But in hindsight, it becomes the exact fuel you needed. It's the ignition point. The moment you start taking yourself seriously because suddenly someone else didn't. And that's what we forget. We think revenge is external, that it's about showing them. But the most powerful form of revenge is actually internal. It starts when you decide that you are not going to accept the version of you they saw. It starts when you say, that's not where my story ends. Pain gives you the push, but what you do with it, that's power. There's a difference between being broken and being broken open. The first leaves you bitter, the second makes you better. When pain becomes the catalyst, it doesn't mean we have to become cold or cynical. It means we've been given a reason to grow, to become intentional, to go from living passively to living on purpose. The greatest transformation doesn't start with ambition, it starts with resolve. With the quiet voice that says, never again. Think back to the last time someone doubted you. Not the surface level stuff, but the real dismissal. The time they looked right through you. That feeling, it hurts. And that's okay, it should, because it means you care. But now ask yourself, what did that moment make you realize? That you needed to prove them wrong? Or that you were always capable of so much more, and their doubt just reminded you of what you forgot? The truth is, success that comes from love is beautiful. But success that comes from pain, that comes from the decision to rise after being ignored, rejected, or mocked, that success changes you. It gives you depth, it gives you roots, and most importantly, it gives you empathy. You've been there, you know what it feels like to be counted out. So when you make it, you don't just climb, you lift. That's the irony of it all. The people who tried to bring you down, they gave you your reason. Without even knowing it, they played a role in your rise. And when you understand that, when you truly absorb it, you stop resenting them. Because you realize their doubt wasn't the end of you, it was the beginning. There's a story I often hear, a young person early in their career, excited, driven. They share an idea, something raw and passionate. And someone older, more experienced, chuckles. Maybe they say it's naive, maybe they just smile and move on, silently dismissing it. That moment is small, barely noticeable to others, but to the person who felt it, it's unforgettable. It becomes the moment they start building, quietly, relentlessly, not out of spite, but out of purpose. And years later, when they're standing on a stage or leading a company or changing lives in ways no one expected, they don't think about that person with anger, they think about them with gratitude. Because they remember that moment didn't break them, it woke them up. When pain becomes your reason, your foundation is unshakable. Because you didn't build on applause. You didn't build on validation. You built on truth, on experience, on knowing what it feels like to be told no, and choosing to say yes to yourself anyway. Success isn't sweet because of the numbers. It's not sweet because of the status. It's sweet because you remember where you started. You remember what it took to keep going when no one believed in you. You remember what it felt like to cry in silence, to train in the dark, to stay focused when quitting would have been easier. That's the kind of success that doesn't need to shout. It walks into the room and is felt. So when someone says to you, success is the best revenge, don't think of revenge as retribution. Think of it as revelation. You don't succeed to hurt them, you succeed to heal you. You don't rise to get even, you rise to get free. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, the freedom of becoming who you were always meant to be, no one can take that from you. Not even the people who tried to stop you in the first place. There's a trap that most of us fall into when we're hurt, challenged, or underestimated. It's the urge to strike back, to prove a point, to clap back, argue louder, dominate a conversation, or post something to make ourselves feel like we've regained power. We think that if we just respond with enough force, we'll earn back the respect they took from us. But here's the truth. Reacting isn't strength. Reacting is still giving them control. It means you're still playing their game. There's a difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is emotional. It's short-term. It's driven by ego. Responding is intentional. It's rooted in clarity and vision. And when it comes to the moments that define us, when we're doubted, dismissed, or even disrespected, the most powerful thing you can do is not fight back, but rise above. Because rising above is not weakness, it's restraint with direction. It's choosing not to win the argument, but to win your life. When someone wrongs you, you have two options. You can match their energy, which means you've lowered yourself to their level, or you can hold your ground and move forward with purpose, which means you're operating on your terms. Think about the people you admire the most, not the loudest, not the most aggressive, but the ones who carry themselves with a quiet kind of authority. They don't react to every slight. They don't answer every critic. Why? Because they've learned that chasing validation is a distraction from the mission. And that's the core of it, mission. When you're clear on your mission and why you do what you do, pettiness loses its grip on you. You start to realize that the real win is not in the comeback, but in the outcome. You stop spending energy on being right and you start focusing on being effective. That's what rising above really means. Not ignoring the pain, not pretending the insult didn't happen, but using it as momentum, not as a chain. I remember someone once said, "Don't wrestle with pigs. You both get dirty and the pig likes it." That might sound a little harsh, but the point is profound. There are people in life who thrive on conflict. They want to bring you down into their chaos because it validates their worldview. If you fight them on their level, you've already lost. But when you stay grounded, when you stay focused on building rather than battling, something incredible happens. You become untouchable. Not because no one tries to touch you, but because you no longer give them access to your peace. The irony is that rising above is often mistaken for weakness by those who don't understand it. They'll say you're soft, too forgiving, maybe even naive. But let me ask you, what takes more strength? Lashing out in the heat of the moment, or holding your vision steady in the face of chaos? Anyone can yell, anyone can post something petty, but very few can walk away from noise and stay committed to purpose. There's also something else that happens when you rise above. You start to lead not just others, but yourself. You become the kind of person others want to follow, not because you're impressive, but because you're stable, you're grounded. And people crave that. In a world addicted to drama and distraction, the person who chooses elevation over escalation stands out. Imagine you're climbing a mountain, and halfway up, someone throws a stone at you from below. You have a choice. You can throw a stone back and pause your climb. You can yell at them and lose your focus. Or you can keep climbing, keep ascending, keep rising. knowing that the higher you go, the smaller their voice becomes. That's the picture, not just of success, but of maturity. The ability to keep moving upward while others are trying to pull you sideways. This isn't easy. It requires emotional discipline. It requires humility. It requires you to let go of needing the last word. And most of all, it requires you to know who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, when no one is validating you in the moment. Because the moment will come when they try to provoke you, and the test isn't whether you can destroy them with your words, it's whether you can walk away, build more, create more, live more fully, and let your results become your response. I'm not saying there's never a time to speak up. There absolutely is. But speaking up isn't the same as fighting back. One comes from strength, the other from insecurity. One is about progress, the other is about pride. Rising above is about choosing your battles based on purpose, not ego. It's asking yourself, is this helping me grow? Is this helping me serve? Or am I just trying to prove I'm not weak? Because the truth is, the strongest people don't need to prove anything. Their life is your enemy. Sometimes the very people who push your buttons are the ones teaching you how much further you still have to go in your growth. They're showing you where your peace still depends on external things. They're showing you where you still react instead of respond. And if you let them, those moments can become the most powerful teachers you'll ever have, not because they were right, but because they revealed the work you still needed to do. So next time you feel the urge to clap back, ask yourself, what do I really want? Do I want to win this moment? Or do I want to win long term? Do I want revenge? Or do I want growth? Because those two things rarely live in the same space. You cannot both evolve and stay stuck in pettiness. You cannot both heal and hold on to the need to fight. You have to choose. Choose to rise, choose to build. Choose to let your success be the story that others remember. Not your arguments, not your takedowns, but your rise. And when they look back, when they wonder how you did it, they'll realize you didn't win by pushing them down, you won by lifting yourself up and never stopping. There's a story we've been told since we were kids, one that plays out in books, movies, and even in our everyday lives. It's the story of the underdog, the one who gets laughed at, pushed aside, counted out, and then somehow they rise. They come back stronger, louder, more powerful. They win the trophy, land the job, or build the empire. And somewhere in the crowd is the person who once doubted them, watching in silence. We're taught to cheer for that moment. We call it revenge. But the real story, it's never about the person in the crowd. It's always about the one who chose to grow instead of retaliate. Revenge has always been seen as a kind of payback, a way to balance the scales. Someone hurts you, and so you hurt them back, only better, smarter, bigger. But here's the problem with that. It keeps the focus on them. The people who try to hold you back are still dictating your next move. You're not living for yourself, you're performing for an invisible audience of doubters. And that's not power. That's bondage in disguise. The moment you redefine what revenge means, everything shifts. Real revenge is not about showing them. It's about finding you. It's about taking the pain, the rejection, the betrayal, and transforming it into purpose. Not spite, not rage, purpose. Because when you build something meaningful, not to prove others wrong, but to prove yourself right, you finally take the power back. It's tempting to want validation from those who dismissed you, to hope that one day they'll say, I was wrong about you. But you have to ask yourself, if you get that, then what? Does it heal you? Does it give you peace? Maybe for a moment. Then validation built on the approval of those who didn't believe in you is still fragile. It's not yours, it's theirs. And if they change their minds again, what happens to your sense of worth? That's why the most fulfilling kind of success doesn't come from being seen, comes from being centered. You no longer need them to understand. You just need to understand yourself. We often confuse revenge with resolution. We think that showing someone how far we've come will close the loop on the pain they caused. But revenge doesn't heal. Only growth does. Only forgiveness does. Only doing the work of becoming whole again on your own terms can bring peace. And ironically, the more you grow, the less you feel the need to go back and show anyone anything. You start to realize they were never the point. You were. When people tell you that success is the best revenge, they're not talking about flashy wins or performative triumphs. They're talking about a deeper kind of victory. The kind that happens quietly, internally. It's waking up one day and realizing you're no longer angry. You're no longer driven by bitterness. You're simply doing what you were meant to do. And that's enough. That's more than enough. True success is when you don't need to say a word. Your life says it all, not with arrogance, not with a chip on your shoulder, but with presence, with peace, with purpose. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't burn bridges. It builds a new road entirely, one that leads away from the noise and towards something far more fulfilling, self-respect. One of the most powerful decisions you can make is to stop trying to change someone else's opinion of you and start living in alignment with your own values. Because the truth is, the people who once doubted you might never admit they were wrong. They might never give you the moment you've imagined where they look you in the eye and acknowledge your success. But that doesn't mean your journey isn't valid. It means their validation was never required. Redefining revenge means letting go of the fantasy that success is about applause. It's not. It's about impact. It's about waking up each day and knowing you're using your life well, that you're not wasting time chasing people who didn't see your worth, that you're building something that matters to you, to the people you serve, to the world, and that even if no one ever claps, it's still worth doing. Pride. There's a moment that often comes after you've achieved something big. You pause and look around. You think about the people who weren't there for you, the people who doubted you, maybe even betrayed you. And at first, there might be a flicker of pride, a moment of, I showed them. But if you've truly grown, that moment doesn't last long. Because what replaces it is something much deeper. Gratitude. Not for what they did, but for what it taught you. Gratitude that you didn't give in to the temptation to fight small battles. Gratitude that you chose the long game. Gratitude that you didn't become them. Because that's the risk, isn't it? When we focus on revenge, we become like the people who hurt us. We mirror their energy, we absorb their values. But when we focus on growth, we transcend them. We evolve. And that evolution, internal, quiet, steady, is the truest form of success there is. You didn't rise to win a game, you rose to become someone new, someone whole, someone free. That's not revenge, that's reinvention. And it's so much more powerful than any payback ever could be. So next time you feel that urge to show them, pause. Ask yourself who you're really doing this for. Ask yourself if your path is about proving or becoming. Because one keeps you stuck in the past, and the other moves you forward into the life you were always meant to live. In the end, success isn't about them. It never was. It's about you becoming the kind of person who no longer needs revenge because you've already won, not in their eyes, but in your own. There's a myth that success looks like fireworks, that it announces itself with noise, with bright lights, with headlines and cheering crowds. We're told that when you've truly made it, everyone will know. You'll walk into a room and command attention. You'll post a photo and the world will applaud. But in reality, success, real success, is much quieter than that. It doesn't shout, it doesn't need to. It whispers in the decisions you make when no one is watching. It shows up in the life you build, not to impress, but to express who you've become. The loudest person in the room isn't always the most powerful. In fact, often they're trying to convince themselves of something, that they've arrived, that they matter, that they're enough. But when you're truly successful, when you're grounded, when you're fulfilled, you don't need to convince anyone. You carry your success in the way you listen, and how you treat people, and your ability to stay present when others are distracted. That's the kind of success that can't be faked. It's earned, not performed. There's a point on the journey where you realize the people you used to want to prove something to are no longer the focus. It's not that you don't remember them, you do, but their voices don't carry weight anymore. You've outgrown the need for their approval, and that's when you know you've stepped into something real. Because your motivation is no longer driven by revenge, it's driven by meaning. The problem is that we live in a world addicted to performance. Everyone is broadcasting, everyone is curating a highlight reel. But what we often don't see is the cost. The pressure to be seen as successful becomes heavier than the actual work of becoming successful. And that's where people lose themselves. They start chasing attention instead of mastery, applause instead of alignment, visibility instead of value. But real success, lasting, sustainable success, doesn't live online. It lives in your habits, in how you treat your team, in whether your values stay intact when the pressure is on. It shows up in the quiet early mornings, the disciplined evenings, the 1,000 choices no one sees. It's not glamorous, it's not dramatic, but it's honest. And that honesty becomes your foundation. We don't talk enough about the silence that comes after you've succeeded. The moment when the excitement fades and the question becomes, now what? What do I do when there's no more enemy to prove wrong, no more crowd to convince? If you are driven only by the need to be seen, you'll feel empty. But if you are driven by purpose, by something internal, something enduring, that silence becomes a gift. It becomes space, room to create, room to serve, room to simply be. There's a quiet confidence that comes from doing the work. Not the work you post about, not the work you brag about, but the real work, the internal work. The moments where you wrestle with your ego, confront your fears, hold yourself to a higher standard, even when it would be easier not to. That's what makes you strong. That's what builds character. And over time, that character becomes more valuable than any status ever could be. What's interesting is that the more you grow, the less you need to be loud about it. You start to realize that maturity and humility walk hand in hand. The truly impactful people aren't shouting about what they've done. They're focused on what they're still learning. They're curious, not cocky. They're present, not performative. Because they know that success isn't a moment, it's a mindset. And the people who sustain it are the ones who never stop evolving. There's a stillness to real success. It's not passive, it's powerful. It's the stillness of someone who doesn't need the world to clap for them to feel fulfilled. Someone who knows that showing up consistently, with integrity, with kindness, with vision, that's the real win. That stillness, it's contagious. It draws people in, not because you're loud, but because you're anchored. When success becomes quiet, it also becomes deeper. It's no longer about numbers on a screen or titles on a resume. It's about the quality of your relationships. The peace you feel when you lay your head down at night. The way your work aligns with your values. The sense that your life, as it stands, reflects who you truly are. Not a version of you tailored for approval. And when you reach that place, you don't feel the need to go back and show those who doubted you. Because the success you're living is no longer about them. It never really was. The goal was never to be loud, it was to be authentic. To live a life that feels right, not one that just looks right. You begin to recognize that the greatest kind of success is invisible to most people. It's emotional health, it's trust, it's integrity, it's legacy. It's knowing that you made something better even if no one ever gave you credit. That you stood for something even if no one noticed. That you helped someone even if they never said thank you. That kind of success doesn't show up on social media. It shows up in how your kids talk about you, how your team works when you're not in the room, how you sleep at night, how you walk into the next challenge, not to prove, but to serve. So when people say that success is the best revenge, maybe they're picturing something loud, something dramatic, but the real revenge, it's the peace you find when you no longer need revenge at all. When you become so anchored in who you are, so committed to your path, that what others think becomes irrelevant. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. Success doesn't have to make noise to matter. In fact, the most meaningful success usually doesn't. It grows quiet, it compounds in the background. And one day you wake up and realize you didn't just win, you changed, you became. And that is the kind of success no one can take from you. At some point in your journey, especially when you've been doubted, underestimated, or even mocked, you'll feel the temptation to talk about what you're going to do. You'll want to announce your plans, broadcast your ambition, maybe even issue a subtle warning to the ones who didn't believe in you. You'll be tempted to say, "Watch me," because it feels good, it feels powerful. But here's the truth. Power doesn't come from promises. It comes from proof, and proof doesn't arrive through your voice. It arrives through your work. There's something profoundly dignified about letting the work speak. It doesn't brag, it doesn't shout, it just shows. When you do your work with excellence, consistency, and integrity, you don't need to argue with anyone. You don't need to clap back, call anyone out, or announce what you're about to do. The results will do that for you. And the best part is, those who once doubted you will have no choice but to sit with it. Not because you told them to, because your work showed them. When you focus on your work instead of your critics, you gain something rare, momentum. Every moment spent explaining yourself, justifying your vision, or trying to prove someone wrong is a moment not spent building. That's the trap. You get pulled into conversations that don't move your mission forward. You get distracted trying to convert people who were never going to believe in you in the first place. But when you shift your energy from talking to building, everything changes. You stop needing validation. You stop waiting for recognition. You realize you don't need to be louder, you just need to be better. Letting the work speak doesn't mean you stay silent forever. It means you speak when it matters, through what you create, through how you lead, through the value you bring to the people around you. And when the moment comes, when people start to notice, when they begin to ask questions, you don't need to say much. You can simply point to the work, let it answer for you, let it be your voice. In the early stages of any journey, your voice will often go unheard. People might ignore your ideas, overlook your potential, or dismiss your goals. That's okay. That's part of the process. The mistake is thinking you need to convince them. You don't. You just need to keep showing up, keep doing the work day after day without fanfare, without applause, because in time, your consistency will become undeniable. The quality will become undeniable too. There's something special about the person who can resist the urge to explain themselves, who can stay quiet while being underestimated, not because they're weak, but because they're focused. There's a discipline in that, a quiet kind of strength. And eventually, the same people who dismissed you will be the ones asking, "How did you do it?" That's the irony. When you stop trying to prove something, you become someone worth noticing. One of the hardest things to do is keep working when no one is clapping. To build when no one is watching. To pour your heart into something that no one seems to value yet. But that's the test. That's the defining moment, because if you only give your best when the audience is watching, then your work is conditional. It's based on external validation. But if you give your best when no one is watching, then your work becomes an act of character, of self-respect. And over time, that's what makes the work powerful. You don't need to defend your dream. You just need to develop it. Because the work you do in silence will echo louder than anything you could ever say. It builds reputation. It earns trust. It creates credibility that no marketing campaign could ever buy. And in a world full of noise, your work becomes your clarity. There will always be people who doubt you, people who misunderstand your intentions, underestimate your capabilities, or question your direction. But they are not your enemy. In fact, they're part of your story. They give you contrast. They sharpen your focus. They teach you to rely less on applause and more on purpose. The real enemy is distraction. It's the desire to be seen before you've built something worth seeing, to be heard before you've earned the voice. And when you let the work lead, that enemy loses its power. The beautiful part about letting the work speak is that it doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see you. You begin to develop a deeper sense of pride, not in how things look, but in how they're built. You begin to respect yourself, not for what others think, but for what you know you've put in. That kind of internal validation is priceless. And it creates a foundation that can't be shaken. Eventually, your work becomes your story. Not the words you use, but the results you've created. The relationships you've built, the standards you've held, and that story becomes magnetic. People start to notice, not because you ask them to, but because your work is undeniable. That's when you've won, not just in the eyes of others, but in your own. Letting the work speak means you're no longer living in reaction. You're living in purpose. You're not chasing revenge. You're living in alignment. You don't need the last word. You don't need to be right in the room. Because your life, your results, your peace, that is the final word. So the next time you feel the urge to announce your greatness, pause, breathe, remind yourself, your best response isn't a speech. It's the standard you hold, the discipline you show, the consistency you live by. Let others talk. Let others post. You build. You execute. You live. And in the end, the work will speak for you, louder than words ever could.